have a kind of certain banter, which Harry used to thoroughly enjoy, pretty sexist and misogynist and so on and so on. And they're spraying around all their normal jokes. And Meghan is picking them up on every single one.
What do you call a name that sparks outrage, ratings, and endless headlines? In the UK, it's Meghan Markle. The moment she's mentioned on live TV, the tone shifts, panels light up, viewers call in, and the tabloids sharpen their pens. It's not subtle. And figures like Piers Morgan and Tom Bower don't just know it, they bank on it. This isn't about disagreement anymore. It's about addiction. Media addiction to a woman who walked away from royalty and rewrote the script. If your name becomes currency, expect people to spend it recklessly. A single comment about Meghan can double viewer engagement. That's no accident. It's a strategy.
At Sandringham, a weekend shooting party, which was quite normal for Harry, and he just thought they'd all get on together, but in fact the opposite. I mean, Meghan is someone who doesn't hold herself back from complaining about people's way of manner, their way they talk, the way they behave, and all the rest of it.
Piers Morgan's obsession with Meghan Markle didn't start on air. It started over drinks. In his own words, they shared what he described as a friendly evening at a pub. Laughs, conversation, maybe even a budding professional rapport. But the next day, everything changed. Meghan Markle stopped responding. She cut ties completely. And shortly after, she made her relationship with Prince Harry public. What might have been, for most people, a fleeting moment of disappointment, an unanswered text, a missed connection, turned into something far more toxic. Since that day, Morgan's commentary on Meghan has spiraled from critique into something more personal, almost relentless. It doesn't read like journalism anymore. It reads like a long-running grudge dressed up in media headlines and monologues. Somewhere along the way, that one brush-off became the backbone of a public campaign. A campaign marked not by balanced reporting or objective criticism, but by ridicule, rage, and near-constant condemnation. And the more Meghan withdrew from the spotlight, the louder his voice seemed to get. Unresolved bitterness is loud. It always finds a microphone. This isn't just about the British monarchy or free speech, or even journalistic integrity. It's about the damage one bruised ego can cause when given airtime every night. It's about a man who never got closure, so he created a narrative where he was the wronged party and Meghan was the villain. In many ways, it's less about who Meghan is, and more about who Piers thought she might be to him. That fantasy didn't pan out, and instead of silence, we got a story. A saga. A vendetta. All because one person moved on, and the other never did.
What was amusing was on the way home from Sandringham, they're all texting each other, oh my God, what a nutter, how on earth can he stay with her? And the same then happened when they went to Tommy Inskip's wedding in Jamaica, which was a great friend of Harry's, who in the end was banned from the dinner after their...
Tom Bower didn't just write a biography, he declared a mission. From the very beginning, he made it clear. This wasn't just about telling Meghan Markle's story. It was about exposing her. In interviews, he's been blunt. He set out not to explore, but to indict. His goal wasn't interpretation, it was demolition. The result was Revenge, a book that reads less like a profile and more like a prosecution. Page after page, Bower paints Meghan as a manipulative, calculating social climber. He frames her ambition as sinister and her marriage to Prince Harry as purely transactional, opportunistic, in his words. He doesn't ask why she made certain choices. He assumes motive, assigns blame, and frames her every move as part of a grand, self-serving strategy. But here's the twist. Bower freely admits that not all of his sources are verifiable. Some are anonymous. Some are hearsay. He even concedes that certain claims in the book can't be confirmed, and yet they're delivered as fact. That kind of storytelling comes with a cost. If truth takes a backseat to narrative, integrity goes out the window. Still, his words made front pages. Soundbites went viral. Claims without strong foundations were repeated until they became public assumptions. And let's be honest, most people never read the book, let alone question the sourcing. They saw the headlines pulled from its pages, and those headlines stuck. What started as a biography became part of a campaign, a blueprint for character assassination in hardcover. And whether you agree with Meghan's choices or not, the impact is indisputable. Bower's version of events now shapes how millions see her. Not because it was fair, not because it was fact, but because it fit the story people wanted to believe.
Well, she didn't want to be the attention diverted from Philip. If Meghan had been there, she would have got all the attention. I mean, the Harry walk up the hill with William that just showed how the media was focused on the reconciliation and everything after Oprah. So when she said to one of her aides, "Thank goodness Meghan isn't coming,"
It was supposed to be just another panel, a typical TV segment. But when Piers Morgan and Tom Bower went live together, the gloves came off, and the spectacle began. What followed wasn't journalism. It was mockery. They didn't just criticize Meghan Markle, they ridiculed her. They laughed at the sound of her voice, rolled their eyes at the content of her podcast, and cast doubt on nearly every element of her public identity. Feminism? Fake. Vulnerability? Performed. Trauma? Dismissed entirely. It wasn't a debate. It was a takedown disguised as commentary. And it struck a nerve. Clips from the segment exploded across social media within hours. Twitter timelines lit up. Hashtags trended. Think pieces circulated. Reactions came in waves. Defenders on one side, detractors on the other. And in the middle of that digital storm, Meghan said nothing. Sometimes silence isn't strength, it's strategy under pressure. Her lack of response was deafening. But in today's media landscape, silence doesn't equal absence. It becomes a blank page, and everyone scrambles to write on it. Some called her quiet, dignified. Others labeled it avoidance. But what's clear is this. When a high-profile woman refuses to feed the outrage machine, others will gladly crank the handle for her. Whether her silence was calculated, cautious, or simply exhausted, it left a vacuum. And in media, vacuums don't last. The noise rushes in fast, filling the air with assumptions, headlines, and hot takes. Suddenly, it's not about what she said, it's about what she didn't. In the end, this wasn't really a story about a panel on TV. It was a window into a media culture that thrives on provocation, profits off polarizing women, and tries to spin restraint as retreat. Because sometimes saying nothing is the bravest and most dangerous move of all.
Saw all these celebrities filing it.
Exactly.
Who'd known her about 3 minutes.
Yeah, if that. And Meghan was really, she controls everything. So it was a great cameo.
Tell me about the Queen. The Queen apparently, you report, didn't want Meghan at Philip's funeral. Why?
Words matter, but so do smirks. During the segment, the attacks against Meghan Markle weren't just verbal. They were performative. Piers Morgan didn't need to say much. The eye rolls, the exaggerated sighs, the smug glances to the camera did the heavy lifting. Tom Bower chuckled at all the right moments, not in amusement, but in condescension. And between the two of them, every jab was followed by a look, a lean back, a knowing smirk that said more than words ever could. They didn't need overt insults. They had tone, timing, posture. It wasn't a discussion, it was a display. A masterclass in passive-aggressive performance where every gesture was designed to diminish. From the dismissive laughter to the theatrical disbelief, even the silence between their barbs felt strategic, every pause loaded with judgment, with the unspoken suggestion. Can you believe her? Delivery can destroy credibility faster than the words themselves. Because audiences don't just hear ridicule. They feel it. And in this case, Meghan Markle wasn't just the subject of scrutiny. She became the punchline. Without ever being in the room, she was turned into an idea to roll eyes at, a character to mock, a symbol to tear down. It's media theater, polished and precise, where tone becomes a weapon more cutting than a tabloid headline. But here's the thing. Those harmless expressions, the chuckles, smirks, and raised eyebrows carry weight. They signal to viewers who to root for and who to ridicule. They shape public perception just as much as facts, sometimes more. And when repeated on loop, clipped into shareable sound bites, and blasted across social platforms, they don't just reinforce bias, they create it. By the end of the segment, there didn't need to be a shouting match or a scandal to get the message across. The damage was in the delivery. The ridicule was subtle but searing. And Meghan, like it or not, she became the silent punchline in a performance designed to discredit without ever getting loud.
Well, she didn't want to be the attention diverted from Philip. If Meghan had been there, she would have got all the attention. I mean, the Harry walk up the hill with William that just showed how the media was focused on the reconciliation and everything after Oprah. So when she said to one of her aides, "Thank goodness Meghan isn't coming."
Woke. Once a call for awareness and social consciousness has been weaponized, and Meghan Markle has become the poster girl for it. For voices like Piers Morgan, the word rolls off the tongue like an insult, not a descriptor. He repeats it like a slur, using it to diminish anything Meghan says or stands for. Tom Bauer backs him up, not with balanced analysis, but with cherry-picked quotes, out-of-context narratives, and sweeping generalizations designed to frame her activism as performance. Together, they push a message that Meghan doesn't believe what she says, that her alignment with causes like gender equity, racial justice, and mental health is all branding, an agenda not of compassion, but of calculation. But here's the catch. Even her most vocal critics rarely attack the issues themselves. You won't hear them argue that maternal health doesn't matter, or that racial equity isn't worth pursuing. Because those aren't fringe positions, they're fundamental human concerns. These are not controversial causes. They're just inconvenient ones for people who profit from the status quo. When values become buzzwords, authenticity gets buried. It becomes easier to mock the language around activism than to confront the discomfort it brings. Easier to label someone woke and dismiss them than grapple with what they're actually saying. And so Meghan becomes not just a duchess, but a symbol of progress some resist, of change some fear. She's criticized not because her beliefs are radical, but because they're powerful. Because they disrupt a carefully curated system of tradition, image, and silence. A system where royals wave, smile, and stay out of politics, no matter what's burning outside the palace gates. But here's the deeper question. Why does her belief system feel like such a threat? Why does a woman using her platform to speak about empathy, equity, and justice trigger such outsized outrage? Maybe it's not about whether Meghan believes in her mission. Maybe it's about how threatening it is when someone both smart and unapologetic dares to speak truths the establishment would rather keep quiet.
Queen that kicked them off the balcony at the Jubilee?
Well, I think it was the Queen, but also I'm sure Charles and William had a big say in that. They weren't going to allow Netflix to dominate their big celebration.
When I read quite a few of the anecdotes in the extracts, there's a lot of diva-like behaviour from Meghan Markle, very controlling about her image when she does.
While Meghan Markle remained silent publicly after the broadcast, insiders say her legal team was far from idle. Behind the scenes, they were paying close attention, watching, documenting, and yes, taking notes. According to media law experts, after high-profile segments like this, especially ones laced with potentially defamatory claims, it's standard practice for legal teams to conduct internal assessments. They comb through transcripts, flag inaccuracies, and weigh whether the rhetoric crosses the line from opinion into defamation. In most cases, no lawsuit follows. But that's not really the point. It's not always about dragging someone into court. It's about signaling something quieter, but just as powerful. We're watching. And that signal, even unspoken, can be enough. No legal action came from that particular broadcast. Meghan didn't issue a statement, file a lawsuit, or wage a media counterattack. But sources close to the matter suggest the press knew she could have. And that silent possibility alone led some outlets to soften their language and sharpen their sourcing in the days that followed. Because in a media world driven by reaction and risk, the mere shadow of legal scrutiny can speak louder than a press release. Power isn't always loud. Sometimes it just knocks once, quietly. And in situations like this, discretion can be more strategic than spectacle. Legal showdowns attract attention, fuel tabloid obsession, and often do little to actually repair reputations. But a carefully placed legal letter, or even the knowledge that one could come, shifts the tone of the room. It cools the rhetoric. It holds people accountable, not always in public, but effectively nonetheless. It's the difference between fighting for control of the narrative and quietly reminding the storytellers they don't have free rein. So while TV personalities threw verbal punches, Meghan chose silence. A silence that wasn't passive but calculated. Not everyone needs to clap back. Some just raise the stakes behind the curtain. Sometimes real power isn't heard. It's felt.
That she had no idea what she's really getting into.
Oh, on the contrary, I think she's a very scheming, very clever woman. No, I think the surprising thing at the end of the book, I realised how successful she'd been. Here was a woman who was nothing. I mean, born, broken family, the whole thing.
Following the takedown, Snap polls showed a clear dip in public support for Meghan Markle. The message from many corners of traditional media was immediate and unmistakable. Morning talk shows echoed the sentiment, with hosts playing judge and jury while call-ins flooded the lines. The phrase, "she's ungrateful," dominated the airwaves, repeated like a talking point. In those spaces, the narrative was clear. Meghan had overplayed her hand, and now public patience was wearing thin. But beyond the morning shows and curated panels, a very different conversation was unfolding. Online, the hashtag #WeStandWithMeghan caught fire. And it didn't just trend, it surged. Not as a PR campaign, but as a grassroots response. Digital communities quickly mobilized. Fan accounts, activists, scholars, and everyday users pushed back against what they saw as a targeted, unfair smear campaign. They highlighted double standards, posted counterpoints, and called out the emotional weight of watching yet another woman, especially a biracial woman, be gradually dismantled in the court of public opinion. Suddenly, the same moment had split into two realities. It revealed a stark divide. Traditional media leaned hostile, while digital spaces rallied to her side. For those watching on television, Meghan seemed cornered. For those scrolling through social feeds, she was being defended. Two narratives. One event. Two versions of truth, playing out in parallel. The platform you choose shapes the support you get. Because in today's world, the media no longer moves in one direction. The audience talks back, and the conversation doesn't stop once the segment ends. It mutates. It multiplies. And more often than not, it challenges the authority of legacy institutions that once shaped public opinion unchecked. The real battle wasn't on TV. It was waged across timelines, in 15-second soundbites, in stitched TikToks and passionate threads. Comment sections became battlegrounds. Reshares became resistance. And silent viewers became digital advocates. This wasn't just about Meghan anymore. It was about who controls the narrative, and who gets to reclaim it when it's misused. Because today, media doesn't just tell a story, it invites a response. And in Meghan's case, that response made one thing very clear. Not everyone is buying what traditional platforms are selling.
Without producing any hard evidence to support any of his claims.
On the contrary.
And it's incredibly damaging.
Actually telling untruths.
Yeah.
And I think that was terrible. That's really why I wrote the book, because I just thought this woman is really doing something quite dreadful to Britain. And Harry has...
Every time Piers Morgan is called out for his relentless attacks on Meghan Markle, he retreats to a familiar defense: freedom of speech. It's his go-to shield. He frames every criticism of his commentary as censorship, every consequence as tyranny, and every backlash as evidence that he's being silenced or cancelled. He claims he's simply saying what others are too afraid to say, positioning himself as a brave truth teller, sacrificing popularity on the altar of honesty. But critics argue that isn't free speech, it's manipulative framing. Because free speech doesn't mean consequence-free speech. It protects your right to express your views. It doesn't protect you from people reacting to them. And it certainly doesn't guarantee you a platform, applause, or a loyal audience. Morgan says he's speaking the truth. Others say he's monetizing controversy, milking outrage for airtime, digital engagement, and relevance in a noisy media economy that rewards provocation over principle. So which is it? Free speech is a right, manipulating it is a tactic. And here's the truth. Piers Morgan is not being silenced. He's not in the shadows. He's not muzzled. He's one of the most visible media figures in the UK and beyond. He has morning shows, columns, a talk show dedicated to uncensored opinion, and millions of followers at his fingertips. He's not under attack, he's under scrutiny. And that's a critical difference. Criticism isn't censorship, it's a consequence. In reality, what Morgan is facing is the same thing he insists Meghan should face: accountability. For his delivery, for his language, for the impact of his words. Because when you repeatedly direct hostility toward one person while waving the free speech flag, people are going to ask, is this about truth or about attention? Freedom of speech gives you the right to speak. It doesn't guarantee you'll do it with decency, fairness, or without pushback. And when outrage becomes a business model, challenging it isn't an attack on democracy, it's a defense of it.